Azrael is a new 11th anniversary 5-star assassin, and his kit is packed with absurd amount of effects. He is a single target arts DPS built around applying death first to enemies with a massive self battery, strong self buffs and survivability, while also having the ability to support another DPS. So in this guide, I'll break down his kit, his playstyle, his strength and weakness, and what teams can best benefit from him. Skill 1 gives him a 30% attack up for 3 turns, a one-time debuff immunity, and 5000 HP guards for 3 turns, a 2-hit evade for 3 turns, and an 80% MP charge. With a max mana loading append skill, Azrael can reach 100% MP from 0 starting charge, meaning he can freely use Black Rail, Bond CE or Event CE without requiring starting NP. This is also his main defensive skill. A 2-hit evade, guts, and debuff immunity protects him against normal attack, enemy MPs, and potentially dangerous debuffs. Skill 2's effect changes depending on who you select. If Azrael targets himself, he gets a 2-turn skill cooldown reduction, 30% arts up for 3 turns, 50% crit damage up for 3 turns, and then 50 instant crit store. Because he also has independent action, he reaches 58% crit damage up from his own kit. Combined with 50 instant crit store, Azrael basically guarantees a full crit turn, while the 30% arts buff also improves his MP damage and MP refund simultaneously. But most importantly, the 2-turn cooldown reduction significantly improves his otherwise long skill cooldown, so Azrael's cooldown are technically long, but his actual skill rotation is much better than the numbers initially suggest. If Azrael targets another ally, Azrael still receives the 2-turn skill cooldown reduction and 30% arts up for 3 turns, but instead of his crit buff, the selected teammates receive a one-time 5000 HP guts for 3 turns, a 30% attack up for 3 turns, and 30% MP charge. So this skills is basically choosing between a selfish crit mode or DPS support mode. Skill 3 applies 3 major effects to all enemies. First, it applies death first for 3 turns, death first countdowns every turn, and when the countdown reaches 0, it attempts to instant kill the enemy. If instant death fails, the target instead receives a massive 50% defense down for 1 turn. Second, it inflicts terror for 3 turns, giving a chance to stun the enemy during those turns. Third, it applies a recurring debuff that inflicts 20% defense down for 3 turns and 50% instant death resistance down for 3 turns at the end of each turn for 3 total turns. Death First itself is the most important part of the skill because it activates Azrael's fixed 150% super effective multiplier on his normal Phantasm, which essentially gives him a pseudo-universal special attack. The defense down also makes him progressively stronger in longer fights, while Terror adds another layer of enemy control. However, the recurring defense and instant death resistance down activates at the end of each turn rather than immediately, so skill 3 is considerably stronger in sustained boss fight than 1-turn farming waves. At turn 4, after the free 20% defense down stack and a failed death first adding another 50%, the total defense down will reach 100% due to defense down debuff capped at 100%. This makes skill 3 extremely powerful for fights lasting 4 turns or longer, but much less impressive if you simply want immediate turn 1 damage. Azrael has a single target arts noble Phantasm. Before damage, he gains MP damage up for 3 turns. He then deals a fixed 150% super effective damage against enemies with death first, followed by a massive 200% chance of instant death. If instant death succeeds, Azrael immediately gains 50% MP charge. Because Azrael applies death first himself, this gets him much broader damage coverage than assassins such as Kawakami Gensai, whose strongest damage depend on specific traits. His MP damage buff lasts for 3 turns, so if Azrael can fire multiple MPs within that period, the MP damage buffs can stack, combined with the ult support and its accumulating defense down, and Azrael becomes increasingly dangerous the longer the fight continues. If instant death succeeds, Azrael gets 50% NP immediately, on top of whatever normal arts refund has MP generated. With an 80% battery, this creates some potentially ridiculous MP cycling against enemy vulnerable to instant death, and this is where normal farming mobs becomes interesting. Azrael's MP has a 200% instant death rate against a standard bronze or silver mod, which usually have at least 80% and 50% death rate respectively, his MP comfortably reach guaranteed instant death. But there is one important limitation: if the MP is damaged, kill the enemy first, the instant death check never occurs, so ironically, being too strong can prevent the MP's 50% refund effect from activating. With death first, Azrael can create his own super effective condition, making him an extremely consistent general purpose single target assassin. An 80% battery plus mana skill can instantly fire his MP from 0, then add potentially 50% MP back from instant death, normal arts refund and art support, and he has one of the strongest MP charge package among single target assassin. And instead of relying on one enormous type of buff, Azrael has access to attack up, arts up, crit damage up, MP damage up, a 150% super effective MP, and defense down. These occupy different parts of damage formula and therefore multiplies together extremely efficiently. Azrael also has an unusually strong passive package. Protection of the Faith passively gives him 30% debuff resistant, 500 HP heal per turn, 10% attack up, and 10% defense up. Combined with magic resistance, Azrael has around 41% permanent debuff resistance. Then with Organizer A, which provides instant death immunity, 100% charm resistant, and reduce an enemy's instant death resistance by 30% for 3 turns before Azrael performs an arts attack. This gives Azrael extremely high resistance against several dangerous debuff gimmicks, especially charm and instant death, but Organizer 8 also actively improves the instant death mechanic his kit is designed around, since he has 2 arts cards plus an arts MP. Repeatedly attacking with arts can continue making the target more vulnerable to instant death. His permanent 10% attack passive is also surprisingly important, because Assassin normally has a 0.9 damage modifier. Multiply that by its permanent 10% attack up, basically offset the Assassin class offensive penalty by itself. On top of his high debuff resistance, he also has a 2-hit evade, 5000 HP guts, debuff immunity, passive defense, healing, and terror. This gives him extremely high survivability on top of his offensive potential. He can handle many boss gimmicks without immediately relying on defensive support, while still having multiple ways to land huge bursts of damage through either his MP or crit attacks. Outside of being the main DPS, Azrael can actually function as a surprisingly powerful plug-in support in longer boss fight as well. Boss fight increasingly takes longer than 3 turns, which means players sometimes need to spread their buffs across multiple turns instead of dumping everything immediately. Azrael's skill tree is particularly useful here because the defense down ramps up every turn, provide 20% defense down by turn 2, 40 by turn 3, and potentially hit the 100% defense down cap on turn 4 if Death First fails and activate its additional 50% defense down. On top of that, skill 2 lets him choose between directly giving another DPS 30% attack up, 30% MP and guts, or generating 50 crit store immediately to help guaranteeing a crit turn. So even when Azrael isn't your main damage dealer, his kit can still contribute meaningful offensive support. The biggest problem with skill 3 is that most of its defense and instant death resistance reduction happens after the turn ends. This means these effects are much less relevant when you're trying to one turn a wave. It also means Azrael's immediate performance is noticeably weaker than his theoretical fully ramped performance. Another issue is Death First, Terror, and the recurring effects are debuff against enemy that counters debuff. A significant part of Azrael's kit can become less reliable. A 200% death chance sounds insane, but against servant and major bosses who commonly has extremely low death rate, instant death isn't something you should rely on. His skill has fairly long cooldown. Skill 2 partially fixed this with its 2-turn cooldown reduction, and a pen skill 5 can reduce each skill cooldown by another turn when used, but cooldown management still matters. Skill 1 also naturally has a longer cooldown than skill 2, so you can't simply assume that every skill will automatically lines up again at the same time. And despite being a single target DPS that focuses heavily around MP and crit damage, Azrael doesn't have sure hit, invincibility pierce, or defense ignore, so against enemy with strong defensive gimmick, Azrael still requires specific supports, a mystical or craft essence to deal with them. For team composition, one of the most interesting option is Double Archer of the End. Compared to Double Castoria, Double Archer of the End sacrifice some defensive and MP gain utility in exchange for extremely strong MP charge and self buffs. Similar to Space Irish, with the right skill ordering, Azrael can reuse all his skills, including reapplying Death First, generating his own 50-star bomb, and his offensive buffs at turn 3. On top of that, Archer of the End provides repeated party debuff removal and enemy buff removal over multiple turns, combined with Azrael's already high debuff resistance, guts, and evade that skips the team extremely strong challenge quest utility. For multi-core farming, you can pair most AoE Arts DPS with Azrael simply because of his massive cell battery and the ability to support another attacker. However, one of the most compatible partners is Ascalaphus. Ascalaphus deals super effective MP damage against enemy affected by instant death resistant down. Azrael can apply instant death resistant down through his recurring skill-free effect or before hits arts card damage. Meanwhile, Ascalaphus provides party art support, MP support, and strong targetable offensive buffs, so the two get naturally synergized into each other. Depending on the node, Azrael can also use skill 2 on himself for the 50 instant star bomb or give it to Ascalaphus for another 30% attack and MP charge, and because Azrael can reach 100% starting MP using his own 80% battery plus mana loading, he remains highly compatible with event CEs and bond CEs. Alternatively, you can pair Azrael with Lady Avalon for increased survivability, art support, and critical damage. Dormant is useful when you're specifically focusing on instant death farming while also benefiting Azrael through evil support, and Castoria remains the safest all-purpose art support when you simply want consistent MP gain, damage, and anti-purge defense. Overall, Azrael takes several of the strongest ideas from all the single target assassins and combines them into one extremely flexible kit. He has King Hassan's instant death potential and strong personal survivability, similar abilities to Karma by creating the condition for his own super effective MP damage, giving him extremely consistent single target damage without relying on specific enemy traits, and he has massive boss fight tools similar to Kawakami Gensai, although Kawakami Gensai focus on the offensive side while Azrael focus on the defensive side. These servants still outperform Azrael in their own specialized field, but Azrael's biggest strength is that he combines multiple roles without fundamentally changing how his kit works, and for that reason, I would recommend at least getting one copy if you have the same codes available. And that's all for the Azrael guide. How many copies are you planning to get, and how would you mainly use Azrael? Leave it in the comments below. For more FGO guides and server breakdown, subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.